Good morning, students. I actually think I've fixed my oh, no, wait, hold on. There it is. Yes, love getting up in the morning with my nice cup of Brugger's coffee and not being able to speak very well. I was thought I'd lose this voice. I thought I'd get rid of this mess in my voice before I made this video, but clearly not. Okay, let's get going. Last unit we did the sine curve, the sinusoidal curve. You'll notice none of this stuff's really changed. There's the amplitude. Don't forget also there's an idea that we have to have a plus or a minus. Obviously this one's a plus. The minus has nothing to do with the amplitude. That just tells you the direction that we're going to travel when we first start. We'll talk about this. B is a frequency, the number of complete cosine curves in 2 pi. C is a phase shift left and right. And D is my, my vertical translation, up or down, right? Nothing's new. It's all the same. So if I were to take a look at these graphs, clearly this one has an amplitude of 1. Here's the one that has an amplitude of 1. The one thing that's different, if we talked about this already, is that a cosine curve will start at a maximum and end at a maximum, and in between it will be a minimum. Unless, of course, you have a negative out front, which means, of course, all that's backwards. We'll start at a negative minimum, and in between will be the max. In between those two will be our zeros. And let's talk about 3. 3 would be this black curve. It's way up here. Sorry about that. I sound like an old smoking man this whole time. And maximum up here, minimum up here. To find that amplitude, you just measure from the midline. You measure from the midline down 3 units, or you measure from the midline up 3 units. To find the amplitude without the equation, like if I didn't have these equations sitting here and I want to find the amplitude, I could just easily do it. It's max minus min over 2. Or in other words, you find the maximum, you find the minimum, and you say, okay, the difference between those two is 6, but we only want half that for our amplitude. In this case, the amplitude would be 3. So it's just very simple. You can do it right straightforward from the graph. Let's take a look at some more graphing examples. This is going to be a short video, kids. All right. This one here, we're manipulating the frequency. We're going to manipulate the frequency on this one. So on this one, our frequency is just 1. We will finish one complete cosine curve in 2 pi. So they're all starting here at a maximum. At least 2 of them are ending at a maximum. We'll talk about the red curve in just a second. So let me find the one that only completes one full cosine curve. And that would be this blue curve. This blue curve clearly just finishes one full cosine curve in 2 pi. Whereas the black one starts here, goes down and back up to a maximum. There's 1. And then goes down and back up to a maximum. And that would be 2. So that would be 2 curves, that green one. And finally, this last one, which is the red one, probably should do this in like blue though, maybe so you can see it better. The blue one starts at a maximum, but it ends at a minimum. It ends down here. So you can see it's a maximum because that was our amplitude here. Went up 1. And we went down 1, and it looks like it's turning back to come back up. So if it only does max to min, you'll notice that the minimum is in the middle of the curve. So we've really only completed half. And so that one goes with the blue curve. Sorry. That one goes with the blue curve. It only finishes half of a complete sine curve or cosine curve. Find the period again. Period is equal to 2 pi over b. And we also know our x scale to be period divided by 4. Nothing's changed from the last unit. You'll notice we just keep carrying stuff over. All right, we're going to see. And this, again, should come as no surprise to you. We are taking the original cosine curve, which is the blue one. If you look at the blue one, let me highlight the blue one in yellow. If you look at this blue curve, it starts at 1, goes down to -1, and goes back up to here. That would be this curve. All the rest of them have shifts, vertical shifts up and down. That's what vertical means, I guess. We're either going to go up or we're going to go down. And the higher you go up, the larger this number is here. So this would be the black one. This would be the green one. And this one here, because it came actually down, would actually be the red one. No big surprise there. It shouldn't come as any surprise to any of you. All right, so let's talk about graphing these things. I'll do one or two, and then I'll pause a little bit and see how you do with them, or you should pause the video and see how we do. But nothing really has changed. Don't forget, amplitude is always positive. Always positive. So I don't care if there's a negative there or not. We're still going to just pick that number out front. That's our amplitude too. Our frequency is this number right here, which in this case is 1. Our period is 2 pi over the b, or the frequency. Remember, this is what we call b, which in this case would be 2 pi over 1, which is just 2 pi. Now, the one thing I did forget to put in here is x scale, because I want to graph this puppy. I want to sketch of this graph. So my x scale would be 2 pi over 4, which of course is just pi over 2. So we're going to count by pi over 2s. Wow, just like before, we're going to need 1, 2, 3, 4. Now those 4 things are, well, clearly we're actually having 5 points. We're going to start at a max. We're going to end at a max. And in the middle is a minimum. And in between those, we'll have zeros. So there's your 4 tick marks. What do they represent? Well, generally they represent 90 degrees, 180, 270, and 360. Unless, of course, our frequency is other than 1, and then they're modified slightly to represent the fact that we have a multiplying factor. At any rate, this is pi over 2, or 90 degrees. This is pi. This is 3 pi over 2. And this is 4 pi over 2, which is just 2 pi. We'll start at a maximum, which is 2. There is no, the midline here is y equals 1. Max and min are found the same way. It's d minus a, or 1 minus 2, which is negative 1. And d plus a, which is 3. To 1 plus 2. So we need to get up to 3. So let me draw it in a different color. So we are going to draw our midline in. Remember, midlines have to be drawn in with a dotted line. Nothing new there, kids. Start at a max. You need to know where that max is. We're going to end at a max. And in between those, which is in between, halfway in between, would be pi. Go to the midline. We're going to count down 2. -1, and we did say our minimum was going to be -1. Excuse me. And in between those, we have zeros. Now, so don't connect the dots, kids. It's nice curved, right? Remember, doesn't cosine theta equal 0 at 90 degrees? Yeah, sure does. Now it equals 1 here because it's really cosine plus 1, but we're going to consider this our 0 line, or our midline, just as we've done before. All right, let's keep going. Amplitude is 1, frequency is 2, period is 2 pi over 2, which is just pi. Our midline is y equals -1. Min and max, -1 plus 1, which would be 0. -1 minus 1, which would be -2. So we have to get as low as -2 and as high as 0. Oh. X scale. Don't know why I didn't put this in here. That's weird. Pi over 4. So we're only going to count by pi over 4s. So we'll put our midline in at -1. Then I'll get a different color to graph. Try some red. So, at our starting point, we're going to have a max. Well, our max is 0. Our max at the end is 0. Halfway in between, which is right here. Oh, I didn't label these. Pi over 4, pi over 2, 3 pi over 4, and 4 pi over 4 is just pi. At pi over 2, we get a minimum. And in between those, on the midline, remember it's on the midline, not back on the 0 line or the x-axis. Make sure it's kind of curvy. And this is kind of straight here, right? We have a little curve there. Now, why at 90 degrees? Why at 90 degrees is it at a minimum? When I know at 90 degrees it equals 0. Well, you have to remember, this is really cosine of 2 times 90 degrees. And that was really 180. And at 180, isn't the cosine of 180 negative 1? It is. So that's why that's it. Let's keep moving. All right, so at this point, you probably should pause it and try these two on your own and then come back. So I'll drink some coffee while you pause it. You can pause me in mid-coffee drink. Well, you're back. That's awesome. Amplitude here is 1. Frequency is 4. I'll bet you got the period or to x scale. You're like, ooh, I don't know how to do the x scale. 2 pi over 4, which is pi over 2, which you should because we've done this one before. So my x scale is pi over 4 divided by, pi over 2 divided by 4, which is really when you divide by 4, multiply by the reciprocal, you're really multiplying by 1/4. So this is pi over 8. Yes, that was tricky. Okay, pause it now and go back to doing what you were doing. You're back. Great. Some of you don't even leave. You just watch me. That's ridiculous. Y equals 2 is the midline. Max will be 2 plus 1. Or the minimum will be 2 minus 1, which is 1. 2 plus 1, which would be 3. So I got to get to at least 3. Negative 1. We're going to count by pi over 8. So that's 1 pi over 8. 2 pi over 8 would be pi over 4. 3 pi over 8. And 4 pi over 8 would just be pi over 2. Got to draw our midline in, which is way up here at y equals 2. All right. Draw. And let's get a blue. So we'll start at a maximum, which is 3. Up the amplitude. We'll go to the midline and go up the amplitude. And go to the end and go up the amplitude. In the middle, we'll go down the amplitude, which is 1. And in between those, we have zeros. That's it, children. Come on. Stop watching me do it. Do it yourself. Should have it paused. Pause it here. Or here. Or here. Or... Yeah, take a screenshot of that one. If you can pause it. I didn't have it long enough. You have to pause it quick. Amplitude is 3. Frequency is 1. Period is just 2 pi over 1, which is just 2 pi. So I come over here for my x scale. That's an easy one. 2 pi over 4, which is pi over 2. My midline is y equals negative 2. So I got a little bit of a problem there. You'll see in a second. So negative 2 plus 3. Here's my problem right here. It's negative 2 minus 3, which is negative 5. And negative 2 plus 3, which is 1. So I got to get the 5 going down. That's my problem. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So let's go negative 5, 1. All right. Pi over 2. Nope. Yep, pi over 2. Pi. 3 pi over 2. And 2 pi. Midline is negative 2. And we'll bust out another color. Let's get a funky color like red. All right. Once again, we're going to start at a max. So in this case, a max is 1. Or you can think about going to the midline and counting up 3. 1, 2, 3. At 2, pi, we're going to go also up maximum. In the middle, which is pi, we're going to go to the midline and count down 3. And in between those is zeros. But notice my zeros are on the midline. Lots of kids get that messed up. Well, that's quite funky. Good enough. All right, kids. Now what we're going to do is graph these puppies. Let's see if I can... I just want to be able to see all of it. So we're going to graph it, including amplitude, period, frequency. The most important thing that you find here is right here, the midline. We have to find the midline. So if you look at the maximum and you look at the minimum, it's halfway in between. So this right here would be the midline. Since that's the midline and I'm starting at a maximum, I know my equation is going to be y equals cosine x. I got to come up with, I'll show you a couple things you got to come up with. Let me draw these in a different color. Go to cool blue or cool purple. Go to cool blue. You got to come up with a plus or minus. I don't know why I just drew multiplication. You got to come up with a plus or minus. Is it a plus or is it a minus? It's a positive if it starts at a max. It's a negative if it starts at a min, and we'll see a couple of examples I think of that. Then you have to determine what the amplitude is. Then you have to determine what the frequency is. Remember, the frequency is the number of complete cosine curves in 2 pi. And then finally we have to come up with a midline. Well, the midline's easy in this case. We just drew it. So the midline in this case is, we'll just go through all this stuff. The midline is 2. So I know I'm going to put a plus. Let me do it in a different color. Go back to red. So I know I'm going to put a plus 2 at the end of this puppy. Plus 2. Amplitude's not bad. It's going up. Well, wait a second. That's 2 and that's 3. So it really only goes up a half. But because it's starting at a maximum, it's going to be positive. And here's 2 pi. So I finished maximum, minimum. I finished one complete cosine curve in 2 pi. So my frequency is just 1, but please don't put a 1 there. It looks kind of juvenile. You know it's 1 when there's nothing there. So there it is. 1/2 cosine x plus 2. Oh, I didn't fill all this stuff in. My amplitude was, I had to crack my toe. My amplitude is a half. My period, remember, period is defined as the time or the distance it takes to finish one full curve. Well, it took 2 pi to finish one full curve. And my frequency is 1. All right. So if you think you're feeling comfortable, pause it, try this one on your own. If not, stay with me. So I'm going to write this. Y equals cosine x. First thing I got to find is that midline. And that midline is actually right here along the x-axis. So I know my midline here is y equals 0. So I won't be adding anything to the end. Nothing. All right. It's starting at a minimum. And it's ending at a minimum. So that means we have to have a negative out front. My amplitude is up 2. So negative 2. My period, how long does it take to finish one full curve? It takes 2 pi to finish one full curve. And it only finishes one full curve in 2 pi. So my frequency is 1. So there it is, negative 2 cosine x. That's it, kids. All right, try this last one on your own. Come on, do this one on your own. Ugh. I'll take some cold medicine. Let's see. We first got to find, let's see. This is a maximum. And this is a minimum. So I'm going to write y equals cosine x. And we got to fill in the pieces. There's 2 to fill here, 1 here maybe, and 1 here maybe. Remember, the most important thing that you find is that midline. That midline is right here. Hope you've paused it and you're just coming back to watch me do this. So my midline is y equals negative 1. That means at the end here I'm going to put a minus 1. My amplitude is from the midline up or from the midline down, and that would be 1. And it's starting at a maximum, so that would be a 1 here. But I don't need to put it because if nothing's there, it's understood to be a positive 1. The period, now this one's weird. The period, how long would it take to finish a complete cosine curve? If I go from here to here, that's from a max to a minimum. Wouldn't I have to go and keep going to get back? So it took 2 pi to get halfway through. Therefore, it would take 4 pi to complete the whole curve. Or, in other words, the frequency, which is the how much of a curve it finishes in 2 pi, is really just a half. So when I come back up to my equation here, this is going to be 1/2, and that's it. So cosine 1/2 x minus 1. There she is. All right, kids, download the homework, get that done. We'll be doing day 2 this afternoon. Hopefully my voice and everything else is feeling better. But other than that, goodbye. Oh my God, I had so much fun doing this video. No, I didn't.